Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out the critical kicking of Slowdive, When the Sun Hits.
No British canon.
There was a time when the British music press had absolute power. Punk, C86, Manchester, grunge, Britpop, and the New Rock Revolution were all invented and made famous within the pages of NME, Sounds, and Melody Maker. But trends are fickle. Once the press got bored of a certain sound or scene, they quickly moved on to the next one, viciously mocking what they were promoting weeks before. Many bands' careers ended prematurely. Slowdive had approximately 6 months of next big thing write-ups and glowing praise before they were exiled. In came grunge, and shoegaze was suddenly not cool. For the rest of their initial 3-album run, they were critically kicked, punched, and spat on by journalists.
Wow.
They were the enemy of the NME, and deemed monstrous by Melody Maker. Despite creating some of the most beautiful euphoric music of the 1990s, they became the most hated indie band in Britain. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of When the Sun Hits.
Y'all, I've never heard of Slowdive. Ever. I don't think they've even shown up in any of these other videos that I've reacted to. I thought shoegaze came along way after grunge, like 10 years after grunge. I didn't know it came before grunge. What? He said something, though, that I had never heard of before. C86? What the heck is that? A cassette compilation released by the British music magazine NME. Okay. Yeah. Critics have too much control, don't they? Or they used to. It's always interesting to see the difference between the critics' reaction and the general public's reaction. I think that it's almost always very different, isn't it? Almost. It makes you wonder what these journalists, what's really their intention? What's their motivation? And I think it's to sell magazines, right? So controversy, gossip, all that crap sells, and that's unfortunate. If you just go to Rotten Tomatoes and look at the differences between the critics' score and the audience score, you'll see it. But I guess I'm glad that NME doesn't have as much influence as it used to. Or does it? I don't know. I've never read an issue. I've never touched one. That's what she's... Anyway, the start of Slowdive and the rise and fall of shoegaze. 1989 to 91, creation Just for a Day and Richie Edwards. Song Slowdive, Slowdive. Oh, Slowdive had a song called Slowdive.
Slowdive formed in Reading in late 1989. Dual singer guitarist Neil Halstead and Rachel Goswell had been aware of each other since the age of 6, having attended the same schools, guitar tutors, and social clubs. She was a goth, and he loved twee C86 bands, but they bonded over the Smiths. As well as later the noise-blasted pop of the Jesus and Mary Chain, Cocteau Twins, and My Bloody Valentine.
Okay. '80s reverb. Alan Moulder mixed that, I bet.
Their first musical venture, the distorted jangle of Pumpkin Fairies,
oh, it's a demo.
soon gave way to the more somber, laid-back Slowdive.
So much reverb.
The lineup completed by bassist Nick Chaplin, third guitarist Christian Saville, and drummer Adrian Sell. The band members were 18 and 19 when they were signed to Creation Records, the label responsible for the first Jesus and Mary Chain single, and at the time had My Bloody Valentine on their roster. Creation head Alan McGee thought we were 16. A bloke from EMI saw us in Reading, supporting 530, and passed a tape on to Alan. For some reason, he told Alan we were 16, so McGee was frantically trying to find us on the phone. He thought we could be as big as Musical Youth. He was quite disappointed.
Produced by Peter Collins, who I worked with on a couple of Indigo Girl records, y'all.
He was quite disappointed when he saw we all had stubble, even Rachel. Aside from the novelty of their youth, it has...
Rachel had stubble? That's a joke, right? Was she a bearded lady? Slowdive. Rachel, bearded lady. There's nothing in her Wikipedia that says she was a bearded lady, but apparently she was shaven. It's probably a joke, though, for real.
He saw we all had stubble, even Rachel. Aside from the novelty of their youth, it has been suggested they were snapped up to offset the label-crippling shenanigans of My Bloody Valentine's Kevin Shields. Then, almost a year into the expensive production of Loveless.
Wow, that's...
Slowdive with the My Bloody Valentine that McGee could afford. Adrian Sell, upon receiving this golden ticket, decided to go to university instead, his drum stool filled by the Charlottes, Simon Scott. Going into the studio...
Wow, this 18, 19-year-old kid got a record deal. He's like, I'm going to college. Wow. Yo, if I got a record deal when I was 18 or 19, I would not be going to college.
His drum stool filled by the Charlottes, Simon Scott.
Hang on. This guy's hair. Wow. 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 Wow.
Charlottes, Simon Scott. Going into the studio to re-record material from their demo, the pressure of being in a professional studio for the first time, as well as making music for the then coolest label in Britain, the band faltered, and so put out several songs from their demo tape instead as their first self-titled EP in November 1990. Utilising a menagerie of effects pedals, they conjured swirling whirlpools of ambient noise. On Evelyn, Slowdive were less interested in choruses and hooks, but the journey, ebbing and flowing towards euphoria. Being music-obsessed teenagers in the late 80s, the band had grown up with NME and Melody Maker as their personal bibles, telling them what to listen to and what to ignore. And for the briefest moment in late 1990, they were the hottest thing in British indie rock. The press saw their music as an alternative to the hyper, dance-centric Manchester scene.
Right.
The calm 4 AM come down to the party. A lot of bands are into that really obvious melody and noise thing, but I think we're going for a more ambient sound. It's not a conscious move to fit in with the dance scene, but there are parallels between what DJs are doing, removing the beats from house tunes, and that sort of come down music we're trying to get. They weren't the only band in Britain at the turn of the 90s that was smitten by My Bloody Valentine's Isn't Anything. And presided over...
Whoa, were those guitars I was hearing? Wow. Dissonant.
And presided over an overabundance of guitar pedals. Pale Saints from Leeds aside, many of them emerged from London and the adjacent Thames Valley.
Very ambient. Oh. Okay.
As band members of various groups...
So much reverb on all this stuff. So much reverb. I guess that was the sound. Yeah, late 80s. I mean, technically that was in the 90s, but like 1990. But yeah, wow. Where did they say they grew up? Reading, Berkshire. Show me on a map. Right? Right? Ah, west of London. Yes. Oh wow, beautiful. A canal. Swan, lion, art, a field, ruins. Lion, art, clock tower, foliage. Oh, victory garden, a street. Reading looks beautiful. Back to the video.
As band members of various groups were often spotted getting drunk at their contemporaries' gigs, melody makers started calling it the scene that celebrates itself. Others, because of the scene's guitarists having their eyes fixed on their banks of effects pedals on the stage, started labeling them as shoegazing or shoegaze, ultimately as a slight at their supposed charismaless performances.
I didn't realize that word. No. Shoegaze. Staring down at your shoes. Okay. It's kind of clever, actually. Kind of demeaning. Okay. What'd Neil say? It wasn't very fair.
It wasn't very fair. The live shows were far from fake. They were about the energy of the experience, about sheer volume, and about taking a quantum leap. It was about getting excited, getting stoned, but at the same time it was about being geeky, something that wasn't rock and roll in any respect.
What does Faye mean? Why don't I know what Faye means? Tina Fey? Faye having supernatural powers of clairvoyance. Fated to die or at the point of death. I've never heard that word before.
But almost immediately, the music press got tired of the scene they had championed. By the end of September 1991, a shiny new version of rock and roll had caught their attention. Grunge. Shoegaze and Slowdive were old news. So 6 months ago.
6 months
Nirvana's
old.
Nevermind had effectively reshaped the rock landscape.
Yeah.
And Slowdive had just released their debut album, Just for a Day.
Damn. Yeah, that's totally not grunge.
With all their best material already appearing on their 3 preceding EPs, they went into the recording of Just for a Day at a disadvantage. Bluffing to McGee that they had enough songs for a full length, the band had hurriedly assembled an album from nothing at Courtyard Studio in Abingdon in a mere 6 weeks.
Where's that? Courtyard Studio, Abingdon. Show me your... There it is. Is that Abingdon? Where's Abingdon? Oh, okay. It's a hop, skip, and a jump from Reading. Not far. Show me some photos. A drum set. What do they got here? It looks like some DBX 160s, DBX 165, or stereo DBX 165. Drummer gates. Drummer something. What does that say? Oh, it's telling the inputs and outputs. That's like a cassette machine. Oh, that's a lexicon, reverb, Amec, Avid Pro Tools. Oh, this looks like a 1176 copy, Transient Designers, SPL. All right, okay. Equipment.
The band had hurriedly assembled an album from nothing at Courtyard Studio in Abingdon in a mere 6 weeks. Such
quick.
was the rush to completion that certain tracks' lyrics, like the allegedly rabbit-based narrative of Celia's dream, were ad-libbed into existence.
It's good ad-lib.
Just for a Day is now seen as a perfectly fine debut, and while there were a handful of positive reviews at the time, the music press was starting to smell blood in the water. One journalist even confronted the band backstage at Reading Festival, mocking how out of favour the young band suddenly was.
What a jerk.
They said they were going to give the album a bad review, which is fine. But then one of them turned to Christian and said, "You'll be stacking shelves in Tesco's within 6 months." It was quite aggressive, quite vicious.
Yeah.
Why would you do that to a 19-year-old kid?
Yeah.
Paul
Anybody.
Lester of Melody Maker, an early champion of the band, in his August 1991 review, called the album a major letdown. But despite this, tracks like the
Classy,
swinging
Lester.
single Catch the Breeze allowed the
Sounds
album
like a
to top
breeze.
the UK independent chart and stumble into the main album chart at number 32. However,
Good.
NME and Melody Maker weren't the only ones beginning to become outwardly hostile towards the band. Welsh punk situationists, Manic Street Preachers, who knew how to wake the press with a custom-made shock quote, resented the whole shoegaze scene. In particular, Slowdive were seen as middle-class, apolitical, and musically adventurous, everything they stood against. Shoegaze resembled punk's natural
Wait. They're against musical adventurous and middle class? Okay.
Shoegaze resembled punk's natural enemy, progressive rock, and mortal sin in the eyes of Manic's guitarist, Richie Edwards. You know how Catholics always hate every other religion, or Baptists hate Methodists more than they hate the devil?
Right.
Well, we will always hate Slowdive more than we hate Adolf Hitler.
Wow. See, that's that gossip drama controversy crap. Manic Streak Treachers knew what they were doing. Recording Souvlaki. 40 Days and I Still Miss You, 1992 to 93. Brian Eno, Breakups and Britpop. Song When the Sun Hits. Slowdive.
After a US tour supporting Blur in November 1991, Slowdive began writing for their second album early the following year. While touring, main songwriter Halstead had been listening to Joy Division, Echo and the Bunnymen, and Berlin-era Bowie, and composing new, rockier songs indebted to these influences.
Okay, good. It's still so ambient. Wow. Like, I can't hear what's going on. There's too much reverb, right?
After demoing about 40 songs for the album, they were rejected outright by Alan McGee, and they were asked to try again.
40 songs.
McGee called us in and said, "I see you got no songs. They're all shit." And so we had to scrap a load, which was great really, actually, because what came out was better. It was a shock at the time. It was like being summoned by our Lord and Master. Further burdening the band was that Halstead and Goswell, who had been dating since the early days of the band, broke up. As such, the lyrics, which were never really the focus of Slowdive's songs, suddenly had a real emotional hurt behind them. Halstead took some time to recalibrate in the summer of 1992, fleeing to an isolated Welsh cottage for 2 weeks.
I thought I heard you whisper.
He returned with the album's stark acoustic closer, Dagger.
It happens all the time.
Given the raw feelings at play, Goswell would find the track especially hard to listen to.
That's starting to have some grunge colors, right? That low-tuned acoustic guitar, melancholy, and the evanescence.
And it would take the band a couple of decades to add it to their live sets. For producer, guitarist Christian Saville had been playing Brian Eno's 1983 ambient album, Apollo, over and over while on tour.
Oh, it sounds like them, doesn't it?
Saville wrote to Eno, and to his surprise, he was already aware of Slowdive and was mutually impressed by what they were doing with guitar-based ambient music.
Okay.
But he couldn't commit to producing. Instead, he would come in to collaborate on a couple of songs. Halstead, who spent the most time with Eno, was less in awe of his legacy.
For some reason, I got thrown into a studio with Eno, and this is slightly embarrassing, but I wasn't really aware of what he'd done at that point. I knew that he'd worked with David Bowie, and so when I met him, I remember like talking to him an awful lot about David Bowie because I thought that was what he was famous for, and I wasn't aware of his solo records. I had no idea like he was like the godfather of ambient at that point.
Oh, wow.
As part of his oblique strategy.
Whoa. Yeah, that would be embarrassing. Brian, have you ever tried putting reverb on stuff? Yeah. I have.
Eno would task Halstead with summoning 10-minute guitar tracks before moving on as a means to open up his playing. From these sessions, Eno would pull out the shimmering guitar play of Sing. His own addition being the water drop keyboards that drip prominently. But even before he was
Okay.
working on his micro compositions, fitting his input in when his kids were at school, when it was time to pick them up, he was gone. Beyond Eno,
He's a
the
good
album as a
father.
whole took inspiration from a more expansive palette. The Velvet-esque Here She Comes,
It's so lonely in this place.
the shimmering twee pop jangle of single Allison,
Listen close and don't be stopped.
and the dub bass of pseudo title track Souvlaki, Space Station.
Wow.
While some
93. Y'all, that sounds nothing like what was popular in the States in 1993. By 1993, it was already less reverb, short, or if there was reverb, it was short, raw sounds. You know, it's very interesting. They kept with the ambient thing.
While some have compared the latter to the Police's Walking on the Moon, its looping nature was the
Sort
result
of.
of Halstead's
Sort of. The chordal intervals are similar, but that's about it.
Its looping nature was the result of Halstead's discovery of Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works 85-92.
Yeah, I reacted to Aphex Twin on my other reaction channel, JJLA Reacts, back before I was doing just a music channel. Check it out.
The spaciness of
Yeah, something I'm being left wanting in these Slowdive mixes are more drums. The drums are so distant. It's like all guitar, keyboard, mid-range, and vocal, you know? I want some kick and snare. You know what I mean? I want kick and snare. I had to.
the track suited the thick marijuana fug that often permeated the session. Souvlaki Space Station will always be one of my favourite songs. It was a really fun thing to do in the studio, just messing about with it, really stoned, listening to it loud, and getting all the drum repeats and different things. It was a good experience.
Good.
High or not, the aftermath of the breakup loomed over the album. As well as on Dagger, Halstead would voice his side on the still raw reminiscences of 40 Days. And the half-conscious loneliness of Altogether. But a breakup has two sides. Goswell hurt too, and expresses that in the quite bitter words of Souvlaki Space
Okay.
Station.
Yeah, what's her statement?
The whole album gives a sense
Whoa, that's harsh. And I curse your soul. I don't want to know you. Damn, Rachel. Damn.
The whole album gives a sense of wanting separation, but being forced together by the nature of being in Slowdive, an emotionally uncomfortable exercise. It just wasn't a happy time. It felt like we had no choice but to do this band and get on with it. When you break up with somebody, the last thing you want to do is be in their pocket, and you want to get as far away as possible from them, which neither of us could do. There were definitely points where I was a complete train wreck, possibly Neil as well at certain points.
Oh
album
man,
sent-
that's gotta be so weird. Being in a band is basically like being in a marriage with someone, owning a business with them. And then like after the show, there's people backstage. Each one of them probably see the others talking to new romances. Oh my God. Stab me in the heart. Right? No wonder. Torture. Damn. I don't know how you get around it though. They were stuck with each other. I guess they could take a break. Like the band could take a break, but then there's no income. They got that record deal to fulfill. Right? Impossible. The album centerpiece though is When the Sun Hits. Okay.
Piece is When the Sun Hits, a lesson in quiet loud dynamics, and one of the more overtly pop songs on Souvlaki. The band almost left it off the album for fear that it was too derivative of Pixies.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the Pixies did that soft verse, loud chorus a lot. And actually Nirvana picked that up from them. And then Smashing Pumpkins started doing that. Other bands started doing that. And it became part of the grunge thing from the Pixies from the 80s. Isn't that crazy?
Despite the fact that the band that had displaced Slowdive in the public eye had done so with what they considered a Pixies ripoff, Chaplin lent into the comparison, playing an especially Kim Deal flavoured bass line.
Oh, that sounds
and
modern.
fought for the song's inclusion, alongside Savile. Gliding in on its twinkling guitar intro, the song frames the breakup in a more reflective light. Acknowledging that it's over, but feeling thankful for the memories.
Nice. Okay.
The key lyric, "It Matters Where You Are," is punctuated with an unstoppable tidal wave of adolescent heartache.
Yo, they're growing. They're growing. This is good. Good. Good.
This moment shows Shoegaze at its best, where it is able to articulate very specific emotions, all through the power of pure sonics.
It sounds kind of hopeful.
It has all the yearning, longing missing of something like With or Without You, but without having to verbalize it. A wall of textured guitar as an all-encompassing sigh.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, maybe turn that guitar wall down a couple dB, right? I want more drums.
A wall of textured guitar as an all-encompassing sigh that nothing will be the same again. Despite this, there's still some lingering kinship, some memories that stick. So in the chorus, Halstead and Goswell's harmonies melt together into one. A fleeting moment of togetherness on a song about their relationship's demise. It concludes as it starts, a slightly voyeuristic declaration, as primal as anything in pop. But now the two former lovers singing it to each other, with a brave knowing smile. Though you are still near me, we are no longer one. There are definitely two sides to Slowdive. The more long, drawn-out instrumental side, and then the more Allison or When the Sun Hits pop side. Sometimes those songs just pop up and you wonder, where did that come from? If Loveless had When You Sleep.
I know where it came from. The spirits.
If Loveless had When You Sleep. Souvlaki has Machine Gun, a dreamy duet between Goswell and Halstead. Its words furthering the aquatic theming of Slowdive's oeuvre. Its title would inspire a regrettable Select magazine photo shoot. Goswell in a massive black wig, posing with a bullet belt and assault rifle. But why is an album of heartache and rippling guitars named after Greek cuisine? Turns out Slowdive weren't just listening to Eno, Bowie and Aphex Twin, but also US prank call comedians, the Jerky Boys. Specifically the sketch, X-Rated Hotel.
You're Greek? Oh man, we could have fun. She'll suck your like Souvlaki.
Strangely, it would not be the only British rock album released.
I remember the Jerky Boys. I need my glasses so I can have them.
Your like Souvlaki.
Strangely, it would not be the only British rock album released in 1993, named in tribute to the Jerky Boys.
Really?
Hello?
Yeah?
Pablo, honey? Yeah?
Souvlaki
Are you serious? Pablo Honey was named after a Jerky Boys line? Wow. Wow. It's hard to imagine Tom York of Radiohead listening to the Jerky Boys. He seems so serious. He was listening to the Jerky Boys when I was listening to the Jerky Boys. They were listening to the Jerky Boys when I was listening to the Jerky Boys. I'm flabbergasted. But apparently Souvlaki would be mixed by former Psychedelic Furs keyboardist Ed Buller.
would be mixed by former Psychedelic Furs keyboardist Ed Buller, who not only sped up Allison and made it the obvious single,
Where are the drums?
but got rid of the murkiness that often overpowers shoegaze albums. It's a cliche, but he's the one who kind of showed us that less is more, and you don't really need 20 guitar tracks on the song, when you could probably get away with 2 or 3. That's the first thing we did when we made Souvlaki. He kind of pulled the faders down and said, you don't need any of those.
I think he should have pulled the faders down a little more, in my opinion.
But another band that Buller had recently worked with was shifting the British musical landscape once again. That band was...
That sounds more like what would be popular in America in the 90s, right? It's clearer. You hear those drums? They're snappy. They're present. I can understand the vocals.
That band was Suede, and it was now the time of Britpop. Despite creating their magnum opus, Slowdive were now a band completely out of time and fashion.
Damn. I feel like they would have been popular if they just had better mixes. You know, that's all they needed. The songs are good enough. Further Backlash and Pygmalion, 1993 to 95, Porridge, Post-Rock, and Calling It Quits, Song Blue Skied, and Clear, Slowdive. I guess they quit, y'all.
When Souvlaki was released on the first day of June 1993, it was received even worse than their debut, though it topped out at a still impressive number 3 on the UK Independent chart,
good.
behind Mercury Rev and Fugazi. It only got to number 51 on the main chart before dropping out completely the week after. Their old allies, The Enemy and Melody Maker, didn't hold back. The former's John Mulvey was the least scathing in their 6 out of 10 review, calling Souvlaki pretty but unfulfilled. Dave Simpson of Melody Maker's brutal comments about the album still haunt the band, and him to this day. At its worst, this record is a soulless void, devoid of pain, anger, feeling, or concern. Sing aside, I would rather drown choking in a bar full of porridge than ever listen to it again.
Come on, Dave. Come on. You're destroying these kids' careers. Have a little sensitivity. Am I right? It's just music. It's just music. But you would rather drown choking in a bath full of porridge than ever listen to it again. Damn, Dave. That's harsh. Let's all hope Dave did choke in on a bath of porridge. Or whatever.
Still in the early 20s, knowing nothing else but making music, it seemed like everyone hated what they were doing, and it started to wear on the band. It almost overtook the music, in that you're trying to put out records, you're doing it seriously, and then every week you've got this constant mocking in the press. It didn't help that their label had its focus elsewhere. In May 1993, McGee had missed his train down south, and happened upon a Manchester 4-piece in King Tut's Wawa Hut in Glasgow. They were playing an electric blend of the Stone Roses, Beatles and Slade, with a confidence that belied their unsigned status. It wasn't Britpop, but Creation could sell it as such. That band was Oasis, and Slowdive couldn't help but feel sidelined. It didn't feel like there was much interest within the label about that record, and that's a shame, because that's a really good record. I guess by that point we were so out of fashion anyway. They were moving on to different things. Primal Scream were doing very well at that point.
It's very different
and
from
Teenage
them.
Fan
Yeah.
Club. And then Britpop a bit later. There were other things going on. A UK tour supporting Cranes followed, but by the end of 1993, all interest in Slowdive had dried up. Saville remembers looking up from his guitar at a show in Coventry, and the crowd consisting of one woman mopping the floor. Label support for their US tour.
He thought he was playing this amazing show. He was looking down at his pedals, like you do in Shoegaze, and he looked up and he saw the janitor mopping.
With the band having to cover the rest from their own pocket. Additionally, they had
Wait,
what?
what?
With the US tour of Souvlaki in August 1993.
Oh, their tour
would
got
be
cut
cut
short.
midway through, with the band having to cover the rest from their own pocket.
Damn.
Additionally, they had no new album to promote, as their US label delayed the release of Souvlaki until February 1994, 6 months later. By the time they got back, they realized that, Halstead aside, they would need to get jobs to make ends meet.
Damn.
A third record, Pygmalion, was made with Halstead messing around with samples and loops in his bedroom, further inspired by Aphex Twin, as well as Talk Talk and Disco Inferno. McGee had asked him to write
Where are the drums? Again. I just hear a little ticky 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 in the back.
McGee had asked him to write a pop album, but what it became was post-rock before anyone had thought to call it such. NME preferred to dub it, Yet More Career Suicide, 5 out of 10. It was consciously
Wow.
made as weird as we could, because we knew Creation wasn't interested in us anymore. McGee wasn't there. Sony had just been brought in. We knew we were going to get dropped, so we thought, f*** it, let's just do this and get dropped. With attention elsewhere, and clearly confused by the record, it took Creation a year to release Pygmalion, finally being put out in February 1995. A week after its release, Creation did indeed drop Slowdive from its roster,
A
and
week
not long
after?
after that, the band called it quits. It was clear that they weren't wanted anymore.
Damn.
I think for all of us, we just felt that we'd done as much as we could at that point. We were all 23 or 24, and it was like, okay, it's time to do something else.
Wow, at least they were young, right? Yeah, 23, 24, kind of around the time you graduate from school. 22, 21, 22, right? I mean, at least they weren't 33 or 34. They could still gain a skill, bricklaying, plumbing, something, right? Let's see what happened to them.
We had been doing Slowdive pretty much non-stop for like 6 years. So yeah, I think the breakup allowed us to get on with our lives. By the time Slowdive fizzled out, we really did fizzle out. We were all pissed off with it.
Wow, that's really unfortunate. The re-evaluation of Slowdive, 1995, Pitchfork, Primavera Sound, and Enduring Legacy. Song Sugar for the Pill, Slowdive. Y'all, I think things are going to turn around. Maybe they were just a little too ahead of their time. Behind their time and ahead of their time, right?
After the desolation of Slowdive, Halstead Goswell and Scott's replacement drummer, Ian McCutcheon, formed the hazy country of Mojave Free and signed to 4AD.
Oh.
Scott
Okay.
drums for various projects including Low Gold, Televise, and The Site Below, and Saville formed the dream pop group Monster Movie. But as the
Okay.
years went by, in the background there were reappraisals afoot. US indie enjoyers who hadn't been poisoned by the UK rock press didn't see shoegaze as an insult. In 2005, Pitchfork rated Souvlaki a more deserving 9.3,
Really?
while other publications started rightly lauding it as one of the greatest albums of the
What?
90s. By the MySpace era, more and more bands were citing Slowdive as an influence, many even embracing the shoegaze label.
Well, the drums are louder, that's good. Cigaros. Hey. Sounds just like them. drums are louder. The drums are louder. Drums are louder. Drums are slightly louder.
So when fellow dismissed shoegazers like Ride, Swerve Driver, and My Bloody Valentine started reforming in the early 2010s, it seemed like it might be Slowdive's time to shine. And so Halstead, Goswell, Saville, Chaplin, and Scott returned to their Reading rehearsal space to play together for the first time in so very long. It was quite goosebumpy, some of it. I mean, we started off with Slowdive, which was the first song that we rehearsed, and it was really weird. We sounded really good, but it was just really, really spooky. We're doing this, and I was looking around at everybody, and we're 20 years older. So much has happened in our respective lives in those 20 years. And in the interim, things were forgotten. Not only the tensions that shadowed the 90s, but Halstead had to use internet source Guitar Geek to remember his exact pedal setup. Their first big show back was at Primavera Sound in Barcelona in May 2014.
Okay. Playing a casino.
And they spent the summer playing the big prestigious festivals that they never got to play back in the 90s.
What?
And this time they were playing for way more than a single mop-wielding woman. We were completely taken off guard. People said to us, "You should get back together. You guys would be surprised." And we were.
Wow.
We were also surprised that the audience was a younger generation, which was brilliant. It was heartening to see that the records have resonated with not just kids of our age. Whereas a lot of band reunions are undeniably motivated to cash in on a band's legacy, Slowdive started making music again. While they could have spent every night forevermore retreading Catch the Breeze and When the Sun Hits to adoring fans, they released their fourth album, self-titled, in May 2017.
Awesome.
Tracks like Star Roving and Sugar for the Pill equaled anything that they released in the 90s.
The drums are louder. Finally. Drums.
Pitchfork gave the album Best New Music and rated it a 8.6. It was also their highest charting album in the UK, reaching number 16. Their next album, 2023's Everything Is Alive, would do even better, entering at number 6.
Wow. Drums.
And through TikTok, Slowdive and a lot of other shoegaze bands have infiltrated the younger generation. Partly, this is down to the fact that few bands can replicate the uncertain feeling of adolescence quite like Slowdive did in the 90s. It's a nice surprise. I think others feel vindicated on our behalf.
Yeah.
People who've supported us since the beginning. The Slowdive story is a bit of an anomaly.
Totally.
Other bands who have reformed, like Blur and Stereolab, didn't get the kicking we got at the time in the UK press. Uppity journalists no longer have the power to shape the musical landscape in their own image.
Right.
Melody Makers stopped publishing in December 2000.
Get rid of
NME still exists, though its print medium heyday is far behind them.
Good.
Music journalism as a whole is important and needed. Music should have context. Adept people should be asking the tough questions. But for the press to be able to make or break a career with such recklessness and unchecked power is thankfully a thing of the past.
Good, yes.
Slowdive are now creating, free of the pressure of the music press, their distracted former label, and the fickleness of shifting trends. And now that the band are in their 50s, they have a lifetime of experience to defend themselves against negative press, or any roadblock that might get in their way. Slowdive Mark II have now been together for longer than they were first time round, and they aren't going to let anyone stop them anytime soon. It's weird. I remember being 24 when Slowdive finished and thinking, well, that's it. Music's done now. Because I felt really old at that age, and we'd already been through the music industry, which is absurd. So yeah, it is ridiculous that we're making music at our age. Positively indecent. Thanks for watching.
Oh my
What
gosh.
other bands do you think were treated unfairly in their prime? Comment down below if you like this
Most
video,
of them.
like, subscribe, and why don't you also do me a favor and share it with a couple of people.
Y'all be sure to go to Trash Theory and like and subscribe.
It really does help.
It really does help.
As always, I'd like to shout out my new top tier supporters over on Patreon.
Mangus and Paul Denzeo.
Magnus and Paul Dinzio.
Okay. Well, wow. I'm proud of them. I'm so proud of Slowdive. Wow. They influenced a lot of people. That is nuts. That those journalists have or had so much power. Give them a bad review, people don't show up to their shows. But now those journalists they're the ones with normal 9-to-5 jobs, right? They're the ones being janitors. Wow. You know, like, I was saying, I feel like all they needed to do was turn up the drums, maybe back off on the reverb just slightly. Turn the guitars down just slightly. Maybe mute a couple of them. And their newer stuff has louder drums with less reverb and less guitars. Maybe I was right. Maybe I know what I'm talking about. I don't really, but I like to pretend like I do. I'm going to tell myself that I was correct. I knew all along. I'm glad they're still doing it. Let's just listen. Show me all that music. The name of the band Slowdive, it is a fitting name. No, it should have been Fast Dive. But in terms of the text, like in terms of their career, Slowdive should be called Fast Dive. You see what I'm saying? But the music fits. 2023. Let's listen to their latest album. Let's listen to this. Alfie. Oh, look, all the titles are lowercase. Drums. Oh, it sounds good. It sounds good, y'all. My battery's almost out, so I'm going to have to end this video. But be sure to go to Trash Theory and like and subscribe. This was a great video. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of y'all, Slowdive. Shove it in those journalists' faces. Suck it. Anyway, I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.